Hello and welcome to the Michael Mama Show. I'm your host, Michael Mamas, and we're coming to you from Mount Soma, home of the Sri Someshwara Temple in the mountains of western North Carolina. We're up here in the mountains in a big cloud right now. You can't see very far outside of the window. That's what I like about one of the things I like about this area is the clouds move and you'll get a clearing, and then sometimes the clouds just kind of cling to some of the mountains, and other times it looks like it's just a ocean of clouds, and you see the mountain peaks in the distance breaking through. They look like islands in the ocean. Anyway, a couple of people have asked, about. I've been doing a lot about current events lately, and they're kind of wondering why. Because for years, I did almost exclusively just spiritual topics, and but see, there's a reason why I'm doing that right now, and that's because we're like privileged. We're really fortunate to be living in the time we're living in the sense that we're going to have the very rare opportunity to witness the transition from one era, one age, if you will, to another. And that's what's happening right now. It can be frightening, because we see all the popcorn popping, as I've put it in the past, all the transition with all the craziness going on. And I use the analogy when water goes, cooler, 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 and then becomes ice right at 32 degrees Fahrenheit there's a moment of bubbling and percolating, which is what's going on now. But that will pass. This year is a major transitional time, and it's not just going to be a switch when 2023 comes, but I think by 2025, you'll start to see things happening. And again, they're, in a positive sense. And there are a lot of Jyotishis and numerology and everything else that it all seems to be pointing in that same direction. So that's good. But right now, what's going on in Ukraine is, it's tragic, it's heartbreaking. But at the same time, if you look at it from a particular way, even though this seems kind of cold-hearted right now, as I say it, but, you could say it's even really fascinating or really interesting what's going on. Abraham Lincoln, there's the common expression, might makes right. But Abraham Lincoln said this, I'm sure others have said it as well, probably throughout history, but he was saying right makes right, right makes might. And I don't know, when you look at the what's going on in Ukraine right now, you can kind of apply that because, Putin and Russia and all that, there's a lot of might there, and they, felt like they could just go in and take over, and they were right because they had might. But look what we're seeing now. The citizens in Ukraine, the people are defending. There was an old woman that she's 78 years old, and she, a lot of people were leaving the country. She said she's staying, and they showed her with a rifle. She's going to defend her country. And she said something like, "If I die, I die," or something like that. I'd have to say that my relationship with death has changed, even just over the past 5 or 10 years, I think. I just recall in the past that was like the most horrific, frightening, but such huge aversion to the very idea, and still, my life is precious to me, and I'll do whatever I can to defend it and like that. But somehow, with respect to the transition and all of that, I'm somehow on a different level, on a deeper level, what have you. I'm okay with it, and people giving their lives for the country is something that, as precious as the country might be and everything, to me, the idea of giving your life for it, it's always hard for me to even comprehend or relate to be honest, But now as I get older and that, let me just say, I'm not as adverse to it as I was years past, Does that make sense, Scotty? Did I lose you, Scotty? Are you there?
No, I'm here. I'm sorry. Yeah, no, that makes sense. It's
yeah. And that's what's going on in Ukraine then. I mean, these people are aligning with what's right, but what they believe is what's right. And it kind of amazes me, like even in this country, or like in Canada, where the police were, beating up on the truckers, do they really think what they're doing is right? Or the police, I mean, how do they rationalize it? How do they justify it? I even heard an interview of one of them. It wasn't an interview. He just one sentence or something to that effect. But it's his job. It's his livelihood. If he would refuse to do that, he'd lose his job. He'd lose his pension. So I get that, I guess. But at the same time, is that really a way to live? And does might really make right? But the other thing is, what does right even mean? What does it mean to be right? It certainly can't mean, allegiance. I've talked about this in the past. It can't mean the allegiance to a paradigm, a belief system, a fanatical perspective. So what does it mean? If it doesn't have to do with a belief system, what does it mean? And really, true right, what's really right has to do with something much deeper. It has to do with natural law and line with natural law. What do we mean by natural law? What's in harmony with the nature of life? You see, when everything is living in harmony with natural law, and effulgent with natural law, it's kind of like a beautiful spring day where all the flowers are blossoming, everything's beautiful, So it's living in harmony with nature. And that brings abundance and prosperity and like that. But now, see, it gets more and more interesting because there was a Jyotish reading. A Jyotishi was talking about, the golden age that's coming. And he was saying that the cycles are natural. You have night, you have daytime, and he compared it to the seasons. We have a winter, and then we go into springtime and summer when everything is beautiful. But now, isn't winter time part of natural law, even though there are no leaves on the tree and everything's dried up and like that? Well, yeah. But what does it mean to live in harmony with nature then? Well, wintertime is just naturally more of an inward time. First, we in the autumn, and into Christmas time or what have you, we enjoy the abundance that spring and summer offered. And then January, February, like that, we go more inward. And so it's sort of a time of regrouping and coalescing, water. In summertime, it's liquid. In wintertime, with the snow and that, it's crystalline, and there's more coherence in the structure of crystals. So it's an inward time, but it's a time to reintegrate, you see. And so the point being that living in harmony with nature isn't something we can simplistically put our finger on and say, oh, this is what it is, and we're trying to do the right thing here, therefore we're in harmony with nature. And in the final analysis, you have Democrats, Republicans, you have Russians, Ukrainians, you have this, you have that, you have this perspective, that perspective. And you can justify any of that with the intellect, really. But where's it going to sort out? How's it going to sort out? the truth of the matter is, I mean, in extreme cases, it's pretty obvious that, some things are just horrific and not in harmony with nature. But we're not talking about those extreme cases. We're talking about everything in between, and what that's going to look like, we will see. And because we're in this transitional period from, an age of oblivion that's been going on for as long as recorded history, at least in the West, it's all been age of oblivion, And so now we're going to be going into this enlightened age, and we'll see. In time, we'll see what it means to really live in harmony with nature. And in a lot of ways, it's not really going to be what any of us expect, And as we go more and more deeply, it's not going to be just an on-off switch from one to the other. It's going to be a transition. And as we go through that transition, of course, then what living in harmony with nature means at a particular point in time in that continuum is going to change. It's going to change. And so we're fortunate that we live in a time where we can witness that transition. It's going to be an incredible thing to witness and to experience, so that it speaks, then you could say there's an art to riding the waves, kind of like surfing, I guess you'd say. Because the laws of nature, if you will, what's going on in nature at a given period of time, and as it changes, what's our relationship with that? What's our relationship with the way things are now? And that's an art form, It's not so easy to do. All too often we have our passions about the way we think the world should be, and the world isn't that way. And by virtue of that contrast, we get out of balance, So how do you keep your balance? How do you ride those waves of your relationship with what you feel is right, what actually is right, and just what's going on in the world, It's a juggling act. Juggling isn't really the right word, though, because it's just a subtle balancing, Is that making sense, Scotty?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. The world is never going to be like, if everybody thinks the way I think, then everything would be fine. It doesn't work like that, It's not about the thing so much as it's about your relationship with the thing. It's not so much as far as, an enlightened state, so to speak, or a mature state or an evolved state or a state of wisdom for an individual, how they live it. It has more to do with our relationship with what is, including our own biases, our own prejudices, our own belief systems. What's our relationship with that, you see? So it gets to be all about relationship with. Now, another thing, and this is very important really, is our relationship with what we were talking about last week. We talked about guardian angels, angels in general. And it's from a Vedic perspective, it's a very interesting subject. Typically, when somebody drops the body, it's, people will say, well, what's life like after death? Well, what's life like before death? There's such an extreme spectrum of possibilities that you can't really say. But in the Vedic tradition, the idea is that that state that people are in after they drop the body, or even disembodied beings in general, it's called Bhutam, Bhutam. And that's the arena that we normally think of with respect to guardian angels, and like that movie I mentioned in the last podcast. I can't remember the name of it right now. Something about Cokeville, Miracle of Cokeville, or something like that. That's largely entities in the category of Bhutan, deceased relatives that are still kind of there and supporting us and communing with us and loving us, But in the Vedic tradition, you could say there are two categories. There's Bhutam, and the other one is Atma, spelled the same way as, Atma, meaning like the seat of the soul, Atma. And that's a very interesting thing because in the Vedic tradition, there are ceremonies, yagyas, ceremonies that can be done by the Vedic pundits so that when a person drops the body, they can do these ceremonies. They do it monthly for a year. And what that does is it enables, if you will, facilitates the transition of a person from the moment of death to a state through the whole Bhutan continuum, if you will, to a state of Atma, liberation, mukti, moksha, And so then we have, guardian angels on a whole different level. We've got the Bhutan guardian angels, if you will. And then in that whole arena of Bhutan would include ghosts and all sorts of things, It's not always a smooth ride, But then we have this idea of guardian angels like Atma. Now, the guardian angels, just to give some examples, guardian angels I talked about around elementary school. You can feel a presence there, and it's a divine presence. And it's the same around all elementary schools. I lived in the Philippines for a while. I lived in India. I lived in Europe, of course, all over the United States. And it's the same feeling. And what you're feeling there is largely, it's not just, the vibe of the children, which is beautiful in and of itself, but also, see, here's the thing. If you're just, people want to, see angels, and they do all sorts of crazy things, and they want to talk to angels or devas, whatever. And it's if you hear this the way I'm intending, it's not really a big deal, and it all amounts to just really one word. Are you just innocent about it? Innocence means feeling what is and not overriding those subtle feelings because we have a belief system of, well, that's not real. You can't confirm it. There's no laboratory test that confirms the presence of angels, therefore they don't exist. And then you kind of force yourself to think and function that way, where it becomes a programming. But if you're just innocent about it and you look at a sunset or a beautiful waterfall or whatever, there's a personified correlate to it. And then, of course, there are the personified correlates to gargoyles and goons and things like that might correlate to a polluted, puddle of sewage in an alleyway in downtown Manhattan, and so really it's just a matter of innocence. And if you just live a life of that level of innocence and simplicity, then you feel not just the things that your belief system allows you to feel, but you feel what is. And then the world becomes full of personified beings. Now, through meditation or whatever, as you open to that, it's understandable and it's common that a lot of times people get into this state of almost like overwhelm. And then they can get carried away. And then, and especially if you open to it in an unhealthy way, where you rip open your third eye, or, there's all that kind of stuff. These are all lectures that I'm just alluding to, really. But in cases like that, people can really get lost in as my teacher put it, a vast and desertous wasteland of astral la-la land, really. And that's just a place where people get stuck, and then they go overboard and they go over the top, and it gets so ridiculous at one point. And that's not just New Age. It's, you'll see it in churches. You'll see it in all different religions, where people just get carried away with the whole thing, and then it just becomes just a mess, you know. But when the relationship with it is healthy, you feel those things. You'll even feel, you know, presence of, you know, all sorts of beings, you know, from time to time or whatever. And it's not that big a deal anymore. It's not that big a deal. I mean, it can be moving, it can be beautiful, it's touching, but it's not overwhelming, you know. Are you with me there, Scotty?
Yeah. Yep.
Am I making sense? You know, what do
For
you have to
sure.
say about that? What do you have to say about that? I'd like to hear your
Well,
perspective.
huh?
I'd like to hear your perspective on it. You know, because there's the Bhutan, there's the Ama, there's also Devas. Now, what are Devas? Devas are like well, there are Devas all over the place. Like even uh, um, Devas are like little mini gods. Every mountain has a Deva that correlates to it. What does that mean? Personified correlate. If you just allow yourself to feel the presence of a mountain and just, again, be innocent about it, it's just natural for there to be a personified correlate. I'll tell you another thing where Devas really come into play is like the Statue of Freedom on top of the Capitol building.
Yeah.
There's a Deva that correlates to that. And what does that correlate to? That correlates to a spirit of like a team spirit, a national spirit, a feeling, and you know, call it patriotism, call it love of country, call it the ideals, what the country is in its soul, what it represents, you know, the Statue of Freedom, liberty, you know, and here's the thing, that if we honor those values, then we enliven the Deva component.
Yeah.
If we, you know, mock it, kind of like, what was that movie with Tom Cruise, A Few Good Men, and then Jack Nicholson was saying about the military, we use those, you know, words like honor and freedom and liberty, and I forget the list that he made,
Yeah.
you know. We use those as a code to live by, and you use them as a punchline at cocktail parties, you know.
Right.
And if you use them as a code to live by, it energizes, it enlivens. If you use it as a joke or a mockery or poo-poo it, you know, then what happens is the Deva value, it becomes weak. It's as if that quality of the personified correlate kind of goes to sleep. And that undermines the health, the integrity of the whole nation, you know. The Statue of Liberty, the Statue of Freedom, and every nation has something that represents the soul of that nation. In India, even villages, each village has their own, you know, little deity unique to that village, or, you know. And the point is, there's an interplay there. Whereas if you honor one, it supports the other. You see?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what I've really noticed for myself is whenever I walk into somewhere, like you were talking about DC, I had never been there, but as an adult, I walked in there, and you have a whole new appreciation for the United States and what we went through and what these people built in the United States. When you go there, there's a feeling of, wow, you know, I'm getting it right now. Just thinking about it, is the hair on my arms is like standing up. You know?
And if you walk into the Capitol building, that just those things hold that value, you know. And then there's the whole art. We'll see in Vedic tradition, there's an actual ceremonial techniques where they can instill the soul of a deity. And what does that mean? Enliven the value of that deity into a statue. And if you've ever seen the Pietà, I remember when I was a little kid, they had the Pietà, you know, Mary with Jesus, you know, at the World's Fair. And you go by that, and it just got so much Shakti, so much life. It's so alive. And that's because why? So many people looking at it with that purity in their heart and honoring it in that beautiful way, they actually enliven that value within the statue. You're instilling the deity, if you will, into that statue. All that stuff, the point is about this whole podcast, really, all that stuff is real and it's tangible. And it's makes all the difference in the health of a nation, the health of a family, the health of an individual, and not. You see, it's real. This idea about, do you believe in God? I mean, to me, on the one hand, okay, I get that question and we can talk about it. On the other hand, it's ridiculous. And why? What is that about? It really has to do more with your definition of God. I mean, if your definition of God is la la land, some guy sitting on a cloud looking down and making decisions for us, I am not buying it, but if you understand more the nature of existence, the underlying basis, there's one thing out of which all this is born. And it's the source of the heart, the health, the harmony, the natural law that dwells in everything, coherence, health, life. And that has a personified correlate. And that's God. Now it makes sense, you see. When I first started teaching, I started teaching from the perspective of hands-on healing. I mean, I was doing hands-on work, and I tried to bring it down to earth. I used to say that if somebody comes home at the end of the day and they're all exhausted, you set a telephone book on their shoulder, it doesn't do anything. But if you put your hand on their shoulder and say, it's like, oh, that's so healing. So the point being that there's healing in the human touch. There's value in the human touch. And as you evolve your ability to do that, what you're evolving is your ability to feel. We've really lost our ability to feel. And I used to do it by having people put their hands on, the chakras, and can you feel the chakra? No. So I would step them through a process. Does it feel heavy or light or dark? If you had to assign a color, what would you do? If you had to say, is it more like hollow, like a tennis ball, or solid like a rock? Which would you do? And so slowly, they start to learn how to feel. Well, in a certain sense, we've lost our ability to feel, even emotionally. And I'm talking about subtle feelings. Yeah, we can feel huge emotions soar, and we even take drugs or go to rock concerts or whatever, so we can really feel our feelings, soaring. But I'm talking about the subtle, the sublime, the presence of divinity, the presence of angels, the nature of God. Those things are a function of a refined and cultured heart. And with respect to hands-on healing, I used to say, if you can feel it, then you can heal it. It's just natural, you see. And that's really what I wanted to say today, because what we're going to learn now is, in the past, might made right. In the age of ignorance, might makes right. The abusively strong overcome the meek, But we're coming into a time now when that spirit, when that feeling, when that connection becomes strong and pure, and when we live in accord with that, then right makes might. And look at Ukraine. I mean, you got this powerful country, Russia, coming in there with tanks and everything else, missiles and the whole thing. And it's what is it? It's the people and their love of country, their love of their community, if you will, and their dedication to that. Their dedication to what they know from deep within their soul is right. and that makes might. Now, we don't know how it's going to shake out, but it's already been historic. How powerful aligning with that deep feeling, that allegiance to the Statue of Freedom or whatever it is in Ukraine, that symbolizes their nation, and even the flag, by the way, our flag symbolizes that. It carries that, see, if you will, the word energy. Energy is a word, particularly with respect to feeling the energy in a room and all that. It's something very misunderstood, but it's just the feeling. The feeling is the energy. The quality is the energy. You could say that sensing energy is more of a psychodynamic thing than something you can measure with a energy detecting device. You see, most of what we communicate with one another is through the energy behind the words. It's not, and they're even saying that now with respect to these kids wearing masks and stuff in school, and they're not learning how to communicate properly because so much of it has to do with the facial expressions. It's the energy behind it, you see. And we're going to learn that more and more. And we're going to learn that real right. I used to say that you have good and you have evil. But good on an absolute sense is stick an O in there, or take an O out. It's God. And evil in the conceptual sense is put a D in there, devil. So you got God and the devil. You got good and evil. So in an absolute sense, though, good isn't a function of our belief systems or our convictions or what we've been indoctrinated into believing. Good has to do with God, has to do with natural law, you see. And that's the age we're coming into, where we're going to let go of our limited biases and our indoctrinations and come from that place of deeper feeling into the depth of our own being, the depth of our own soul. And that's where we look for truth. It's not about emotion. It's not about indoctrination. It lies much deeper. Okay, anything else, Scotty, or is that about it for today?
I think that's it for today.
All right, good. Thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed it. And give it some thought. And if you have questions, you can always go to michaelmamas.net, and there's a place there after each blog where you can make a comment. And I look at those. If you make a comment, I'll see it. And if need be, I'll respond. Okay, thanks for listening. Yo, Scotty.
Also, if anybody wants to comment during, and I can try to look and see the questions and bring them into the conversation also.
Yeah, during these podcasts, if you type in a question, hopefully Scotty will pick it up and we'll talk about it. All right, thanks for listening.